How I learned English in 4 months. The fear of English. I have always been scared of English. It was never easy for me. In school, I was good at other subjects like math and science, but English felt like a big wall I could never climb. I didn't understand why it was so difficult. I could understand a few words, but I had trouble speaking and writing in English. It made me feel nervous, and every time I had to speak in class, I was afraid of making mistakes. My biggest fear was speaking in front of others. I was always afraid that my classmates or teacher would laugh at me if I said something wrong. I didn't want anyone to think I was not smart or that I wasn't good enough. This fear made me avoid speaking in English as much as I could. I knew that I needed to learn it, but the fear kept me from trying. Even though I didn't like English, I knew how important it was. English is used all over the world. It is the language that people from different countries use to talk to each other. I knew that if I wanted a good job and to talk to people from other countries, I needed to learn English. But the fear of making mistakes stopped me from doing that. I was stuck, not knowing what to do next. One day, while sitting in class, I realized something important. I realized that this fear was holding me back. I was not going to get any better if I kept avoiding English. I was too afraid to make mistakes, but I couldn't let that stop me. I wanted to be able to speak, write, and understand English like everyone else. I didn't want to be afraid anymore. That day, I decided that I would face my fear. I promised myself that I would not let my mistakes stop me. I knew that making mistakes was okay, because that is how we learn. No one is perfect, and it is okay to fail sometimes. What was important was to keep trying and not give up. I made a promise to myself that I would try every day, no matter how hard it was. This was the first step in my journey to learning English. I was no longer going to be afraid. A wake-up call in class. One day, something happened that made me realize how important it was to learn English. It was a regular school day, and I was sitting in my English class. We were having a lesson on grammar, and I had no idea what was going on. My teacher was explaining the rules, but everything sounded confusing. I could see that my classmates understood, and they were taking notes and answering questions easily. But for me, it felt like I was in a completely different world. I was sitting quietly, not saying a word, hoping that no one would notice I was not following along. As the lesson went on, I started feeling more and more frustrated. I didn't want to look silly in front of my classmates, but I couldn't understand what was being taught. I was too afraid to ask for help because I didn't want anyone to know that I was struggling. At that moment, my teacher asked me a question. She looked at me and said, "James, can you answer this question for the class?" My heart started to race. I could feel my palms getting sweaty. I had no idea what the answer was, and I was terrified of saying something wrong. I froze. The whole class was looking at me, waiting for an answer, and I couldn't speak. It felt like the whole room was closing in on me. That was when I realized something important. I couldn't keep avoiding English like this. I couldn't just sit quietly and hope it would get easier. If I wanted to do well in school and in life, I had to learn English. I couldn't let my fear stop me anymore. I knew that if I didn't start trying, I would never get better. I had to face my fear and take action. After that class, I went home feeling upset with myself. I thought about what had happened and realized that I didn't want to feel like that again. I made a decision that day. I would no longer let my fear of English control me. I would work harder, study more, and try every day to improve. That moment in class was the wake-up call. I needed to start learning English seriously. From that day forward, I promised myself that I would never let fear stop me from reaching my goals. My father's advice. After my wake-up call in class, I knew I had to change the way I was thinking about English. I didn't want to be scared anymore, but I didn't know how to start. That's when I decided to talk to my father. My father was always very supportive and kind. He always knew how to help me when I was confused or upset. One evening, I sat down with him and told him how I felt about English. I explained how scared I was of making mistakes and how I struggled to understand it. I also told him how I had been avoiding English because I didn't want to be judged by others. My father listened quietly and then smiled at me. He said something that changed my whole perspective. He told me, "James, learning anything new takes time. You can't be perfect at it right away. Don't worry about making mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. The more you practice, the better you will become. The important thing is to keep trying and not give up." He told me that when he was younger, he didn't know much English either. But he worked hard every day and kept practicing until he was able to speak it well. My father's words gave me a new sense of hope. I realized that I didn't have to be perfect right away. I just needed to take one step at a time and keep trying. I also understood that making mistakes was okay. It was normal to fail at something new. The most important thing was to keep moving forward. He gave me a simple piece of advice that stuck with me. Make English a part of your daily life. Practice every day, even if it's just a little. It will get easier with time. I promised my father that I would follow his advice and start working on my English every single day. That night, I felt a sense of peace. I no longer felt alone in my struggle with English. My father's support made me feel stronger. I was ready to take the next step and work harder. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was no longer afraid. I had a plan, and I was going to follow it. The first step: learning words. After my father's advice, I felt more confident about learning English. I understood that I didn't need to be perfect right away, but I needed to start somewhere. The first step I decided to take was to learn new words. I knew that knowing words was the foundation of speaking and understanding English. If I didn't know enough words, I wouldn't be able to express myself or understand others. I started by making a list of common English words. I didn't want to make it too complicated, so I began with simple words that I would use every day. Words like house, car, food, friend, and family were easy to remember. I wrote down the words on a piece of paper and tried to learn them one by one. Each day, I focused on learning 5 new words. I repeated them out loud, tried to use them in sentences, and wrote them down over and over again. At first, it felt difficult. I would forget the words, or I would mix them up. Sometimes, I would get frustrated because I couldn't remember them all. But I remembered my father's advice. Learning takes time. I didn't let myself get upset. Instead, I kept going. Every day, I spent a little time learning new words. I made it a habit. One of the things that helped me was using flashcards. I wrote the word on one side and the meaning on the other. I would look at the word and try to remember its meaning. Flashcards made it easier for me to review the words I had learned, and it felt good to see my progress. I also started to listen to English songs, watch movies, and read simple books. Whenever I heard or saw a word I had learned, I would get excited. It felt like I was connecting the words I was learning with the world around me. I was beginning to understand more and more. In just a few weeks, I could already understand and use many simple words in conversation. This was my first real step in learning English. It wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. I could feel my confidence growing every day. I knew I had to keep learning new words if I wanted to improve, and I was ready to continue on this journey. Speaking small sentences. After learning a few words, I knew the next step was to start using them in sentences. I was excited, but also a little nervous. Speaking in English felt harder than just learning words. I didn't feel confident enough to have a full conversation, but I knew that speaking small sentences would help me build my skills. At first, I started with simple sentences. For example, I would say things like, "I like coffee," or "She is my friend." These sentences were easy to make because I already knew the words. But I didn't just stop there. Every day, I tried to make more sentences using the words I had learned. I practiced them out loud, even when no one was around to listen. Speaking aloud helped me feel more comfortable. One of the ways I practiced was by talking to myself. I would describe things I saw around me. For example, if I was in my room, I would say, "This is my bed. It is blue. I have a book on the table." This helped me connect the words I knew to the things in my environment. It felt a little funny at first, but I didn't care. I was learning. I also tried to speak with my family. My father and mother were very supportive. They would ask me simple questions in English, like, "What did you do today?" or "What is your favorite color?" I would try my best to answer in full sentences. Sometimes I made mistakes, and my parents would help me fix them. But I didn't feel bad. I understood that making mistakes was part of learning. Another way I practiced speaking was by using language apps and online videos. These tools helped me hear how sentences were formed and gave me more practice speaking. I would repeat sentences after the speaker, trying to match their pronunciation and rhythm. It wasn't easy, but it helped me improve. Over time, I began to feel more confident. Speaking small sentences started to feel natural, and I was able to have short conversations in English. It wasn't perfect, but I was making progress. I learned that the more I spoke, the easier it became. I was no longer afraid to make mistakes because I knew that each mistake was an opportunity to learn. Making English a habit. As I continued learning English, I realized that the key to improvement was consistency. It wasn't enough to study for a few days and then forget about it. To truly get better at English, I needed to make it a part of my daily life. I had to practice every single day, even if it was just for a short time. I started setting aside a small amount of time each day for English practice. At first, I made it a goal to study for 20 minutes every day. It didn't matter if I was tired or busy, I made sure to find time to practice. Some days I would practice in the morning, while other days I practiced in the evening. The important thing was that I was making English a habit. One of the easiest ways I made English a habit was by listening to English during my daily activities. For example, I would listen to English podcasts or songs while walking to school or doing chores at home. Even if I didn't understand everything, I tried to focus on the words and phrases I recognized. Over time, this helped me get used to the sounds and rhythm of the language. I also set small, achievable goals for myself. For example, I would try to learn 5 new words every day or read 1 page of an English book each night. These small goals made me feel like I was making progress, and they motivated me to keep going. When I achieved a goal, I felt proud of myself, which made me want to keep learning. I started speaking in English as much as I could, even when no one else was around. I would talk to myself, describe what I was doing, or try to form small conversations in my mind. This helped me get comfortable with speaking. The more I practiced, the easier it became to speak without thinking too much. One important thing I learned was that making mistakes is okay. Sometimes I would use the wrong word or make a mistake in a sentence. But instead of feeling bad, I learned from those mistakes and moved on. I realized that learning English wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying every day and improving bit by bit. Slowly, English became a natural part of my daily life. I didn't have to force myself to study anymore. It felt normal to speak, read, and listen to English every day. By making English a habit, I was able to improve quickly and with confidence. This was one of the most important steps in my journey to mastering English. The power of practice. As I continued my journey of learning English, I began to understand the true power of practice. At first, I had learned a few words and could speak simple sentences. But I knew that to become truly fluent in English, I had to practice more and more. I couldn't expect to improve if I only studied for a short time every now and then. To get better, I needed to practice every day. I realized that practicing English wasn't just about sitting down and studying grammar rules or vocabulary. It was about using English in real situations. For example, whenever I had the chance, I would try to speak English with my family, friends, or anyone who knew the language. Sometimes I would ask my friends to talk to me in English, and we would practice together. Even if I made mistakes, I felt happy because I was using what I had learned. I also focused on reading in English. I started with simple books, stories, and articles. At first, I couldn't understand everything, but I didn't stop. I would read slowly, look up the words I didn't know, and try to understand the meaning from the context. Slowly, I began to recognize more words and understand more of what I was reading. Listening was also an important part of my practice. I would listen to English podcasts, watch English movies, and follow English language news. The more I listened, the better I became at understanding spoken English. It helped me improve my pronunciation and understand how sentences were formed in real-life conversations. The key to all of this was consistency. It didn't matter if I was busy or tired. I made sure to practice a little every day. Even on days when I didn't feel like studying, I would still try to do something in English. Whether it was reading a short story or listening to a podcast, I kept practicing. I understood that the more I practiced, the better I would become. I also started to write in English. Writing helped me improve my grammar and learn how to structure my sentences. I would write simple diary entries or short stories. Each time I wrote, I paid attention to the mistakes I made and tried not to repeat them. Writing gave me the chance to practice the rules I had learned and use the vocabulary I had acquired. By continuing to practice every day, I noticed a huge improvement in my English skills. What seemed difficult at first was now becoming easier. The power of consistent practice had made a big difference in my ability to communicate in English. I realized that practice was the secret to mastering any skill, and English was no different. My first English conversation. After months of practicing words, sentences, and listening to English, I finally felt ready for my first real conversation in English. At first, I was nervous. I had learned so many words and practiced so many sentences, but speaking with someone was different. What if I made a mistake? What if I didn't understand what they said? These thoughts made me feel scared, but I remembered what my father had told me. Making mistakes was okay, as long as I kept trying. One day, I met a friend who spoke English. His name was Alex, and we had known each other for a long time. We always spoke in our native language, but today I decided to speak to him in English. I took a deep breath and said, "Hello, Alex. "How are you today?" Alex smiled and replied, "I'm good, thank you. How about you?" I was so happy that I understood his reply. I had been practicing these kinds of sentences, but hearing them in a real conversation felt amazing. I replied, "I'm good too, thank you." At first, I spoke slowly and carefully. I made sure to think about each sentence before saying it. I wasn't speaking fast, and I wasn't trying to make long, complicated sentences. I stuck with what I knew, keeping it simple. As the conversation went on, I began to feel more comfortable. I started using the new words and phrases I had learned, and I was able to respond without thinking too much. Sometimes, I needed to ask Alex to repeat something or explain a word, but that was okay. He was patient and happy to help. He even complimented me on how well I was speaking English, which made me feel proud. After our conversation, I felt like I had achieved something important. Speaking in English wasn't as scary as I had imagined. It was actually fun. I realized that the more I practiced speaking, the easier it would become. The fear of making mistakes was slowly disappearing, and I was more confident about having conversations in English. This conversation was a turning point for me. It showed me that I was ready to communicate in English, and it gave me the motivation to continue speaking with others. I knew that speaking in English would become a normal part of my life if I kept practicing. Confidence through consistency. As I continued my journey with English, I started to notice something amazing. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. In the beginning, I was shy and afraid to speak because I was worried I would make mistakes. But as I kept practicing every day, I started to believe in myself more. I realized that confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from practicing and improving bit by bit. Every day, I made sure to do something in English, whether it was speaking, reading, listening, or writing. Sometimes, I would repeat the same sentences over and over again until they felt natural. Other times, I would listen to a podcast or read a book in English to improve my understanding. I started to enjoy the process of learning because I saw how much progress I was making. I could feel my skills growing, and that made me feel proud. The more I practiced, the less afraid I was to make mistakes. I learned that making mistakes was part of the process, and it was okay. I no longer worried about saying the wrong word or using the wrong grammar. Instead, I focused on improving. Each mistake was an opportunity to learn and get better. This mindset gave me the freedom to speak without fear. My family also noticed my growing confidence. They could see how much I had improved, and they encouraged me even more. Whenever I spoke in English, they would tell me how proud they were of my progress. Their support helped boost my confidence, and I felt more comfortable using English in front of them. I also started to speak with more people in English. At school, I joined study groups where we communicated in English. I spoke with friends, teachers, and even strangers whenever I had the chance. Each conversation made me feel more confident, and soon I wasn't afraid to speak English in any situation. I learned that consistency was the key to building confidence. By practicing every day, I became more comfortable with the language, and my fear of speaking disappeared. The small steps I took each day added up to big improvements. Confidence doesn't happen overnight. It comes from hard work, practice, and not giving up. By continuing to practice consistently, I knew I was on the right path to becoming fluent in English. I was no longer scared to speak, and I was excited to continue learning and improving. I mastered English in 4 months. Looking back at my journey, it's hard to believe that just 4 months ago, I was scared to speak English and didn't know how to form a single sentence. Now, I can confidently have conversations, read books, watch movies, and understand almost everything I hear. It feels like a dream come true. I never imagined I could achieve so much in such a short amount of time. The key to my success was never giving up. Even when I felt frustrated or worried that I wouldn't improve, I kept practicing. I reminded myself that learning English wasn't a race. It was a journey. Every day, I took small steps, and each step brought me closer to my goal. I learned that consistency, practice, and patience were the most important parts of learning a language. In the beginning, I felt nervous about speaking English. But after speaking with my family and friends, listening to English podcasts, and reading books, I became more comfortable. My fear of making mistakes started to disappear. I realized that mistakes are just part of the learning process. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. And soon, speaking English became as easy as speaking my native language. I also learned that making English a part of my daily life was essential. I didn't just study when I was sitting at my desk. I listened to English during my daily activities, like when I was walking, doing chores, or even before going to bed. I spoke to myself in English, read short stories, and watched movies in English. Slowly, English became a natural part of my life, and it didn't feel like studying anymore. It felt like something I loved doing. By the end of the 4 months, I had gone from struggling to speak English to feeling confident and fluent. My friends and family were amazed at how much I had learned, and I felt proud of what I had accomplished. It wasn't just about speaking English. It was about building my confidence, learning from my mistakes, and enjoying the process of learning. Mastering English in 4 months was not easy, but it was possible because I never gave up. I put in the effort every day, practiced consistently, and stayed patient. Now, I am proud of my progress, and I know that I can continue improving and learning more. My journey with English is far from over, but I'm excited to see where it takes me next. If you liked this story, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Global English Tales.